Hey nerds, welcome back to Read by a Redhead. If you're new here, I'm Martha the Redhead, and today I thought I'd come to you with my kind of top 10 audiobook recommendations. Now, the reason I decided to film this video is A, I love audiobooks, and B, I find audiobooks are perfect if you're struggling to read or you're really busy. Like for me, 2020 was not a good reading year in terms of keeping up on new releases or reading physical books in general, but audiobooks kept me going. No matter what space my brain was in, I was able to sit down, relax with my earphone in, and just enjoy listening to a story. Now, some of the titles on this list are like standalones, they're individuals. Many of them are series, so rather than picking like one book in the series, I've just got the whole series. And this is not even like a third of my audiobook library. I have listened to a lot more than this, but I've narrowed it down to 10, and I think I'm happy with the top 10. So coming in at number 10 is the Arc of a Scythe trilogy by Neal Shusterman. Now, this trilogy starts off set in a dystopian future where humans have evolved to the point where technology keeps us alive. We're no longer dying. But to combat that, there is a part of the government called the Scythe, and their job is to glean or kill people. And the first book follows two teenagers, Citra and Rowan, who are brought in as apprentice scythes. Now, like most of BookTube and most readers of YA I know, I love this series. It's fantastic. In particular, I loved the audiobooks. I thought they just worked. Now, for some on this list, I have specific reasons why I love the audiobooks. For this series, I don't. It just worked exceptionally well. And when Toll was due to come out, I reread the first two on audio and blasted through them in about a day apiece. They are brilliant, and I think because this series deals with quite a lot of intelligent concepts, things that can take a bit of time to wrap your head around, listening to it is a fantastic way of taking in that information without being overwhelmed. So yeah, I recommend the whole trilogy, but especially if you've kind of been put off by this series or found it a bit intimidating, pick the first one up on audiobook and I assure you, you will not be disappointed. Coming in at number 9, ironically, is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. And I did not put it here just for the pun, but I quite appreciate it. So if you don't know, Ninth House was Leigh Bardugo's first adult book. It is the start of a series, but at the moment it exists on its own. And it follows Alex Galaxy Stern as she joins Yale and uncovers the secret societies and how they are all connected to the dead. Now, I read this book physically when it first came out. I had an ARC. I absolutely loved it. And in 2020, I was desperate to reread it because I find like deeper fantasy, I find rereading it really satisfying. So I picked up the audiobook. It is narrated by Lauren Fortgang, who narrates all the other books in the Grishaverse series, and she is such a fantastic narrator. But more than that, I think, again, because this book deals with quite a lot and it's a lot to take in, the audiobook format was perfect for that. And it really helped me understand the character of Alex better by feeling as if she was talking to me at times. It's fantastic. And again, if you found this book intimidating by looking at it, give the audiobook a go because it's so good. Number 8 is one of my favourite standalone crime novels, standalone audiobooks altogether, and that is The Truth About Keeping Secrets by Savannah Brown. Now, this book is fantastic. It deals with a crime and a mystery, but at the same time, the main character is queer and is kind of coming to terms with other people's relationships with her queerness. It's fantastic. It's quite dark. It's quite deep. So aside from how good the book is and how much I enjoyed it as a story, as the characters, I particularly loved this as an audiobook because it's actually narrated by Savannah Brown, the author. And her voice and the way she presses on certain parts and really puts emotion into the story absolutely sold this for me. Now, I will say this story does deal with some dark things, things such as grief, and I found that the audiobook made that a bit all-consuming at times. So I highly recommend it, but listen to it when you're in the right frame of mind because it isn't an easy read to listen to. Number 7 on this list is another crime, and that's quite odd for me because I don't read a lot of crime, but this one in particular was fantastic, and that is Sadie by Courtney Summers. Now, this book's actually quite hard to get a hold of in the UK. I don't think it has an official UK publisher, but the audiobook is quite readily available. And Sadie is particularly good on audiobook because of the format. Now, the book follows a mystery of a girl going missing, but it follows that mystery through a podcast. Hence, it works as an audiobook. It is written as if somebody is speaking, so having somebody just simply narrate it to you, it's as if this is what the book was made for. It's brilliant, and the book kind of splits between the podcast and what was actually happening to Sadie, and that dichotomy between the two stories does not get confused. It doesn't get blended. The voices and narration is done so well that you just can't stop. It's like I was addicted to this podcast, except it wasn't a podcast, it was the book. And yeah, I'm very excited to see what else Courtney Summers comes out with, purely because of how much I enjoyed Sadie in the audiobook format. Number 6 is become one of my all-time favourite series, and it's a middle grade series, and that is The Murder Most Unladylike by Robin Stevens. These books are amazing, but there's a lot of them, and that for me was part of the reason I picked up the audiobooks. So I was due to study, I think, number 7 in the series when I was doing my undergraduate degree. And I can't start at book 7. I had to read the whole thing, but I didn't have a lot of time. I was studying English Lit, reading all the time. So I started the audiobooks and became obsessed. They are brilliant. Now, if you haven't heard of this series, the first book starts with Daisy and Hazel, who are 2 girls at a British all-girls boarding school. It's set in the past, and I can't remember off the top of my head when it is, so I will insert it somewhere on this screen. But yes, it's set like pre-World War II, and it's brilliant. And basically, they form a detective society who at first find things like the missing tie and, you know, normal school things, until Hazel stumbles across a dead body of a teacher. Yeah, this is middle grade. And it is fantastic, and even better, the narrator perfectly matches the narrator for the story. So in the book, it is all narrated by Hazel, who was born in Hong Kong but is at school in England. So a lot of the books deal with her sense of belonging and her sense of home and who she is. But better than that, the narrator is actually Katie Leung, who was Cho Chang in the Potter films. But she is fantastic, and I thought it was even more amazing to have Asian representation for the narrator of the audiobooks. It's not as if the accent or anything is different. It sounds like a pretty standard, you know, posh British accent. But I just think it's wonderful that that little extra nod to Hazel's heritage is reflected in the narrator. Also, side note, because a lot of people don't seem to realise, this book series is queer. And it's middle grade and it's mystery. It doesn't really come in and get confirmed until Death in the Spotlight, but it is wonderful, and I recommend this book series to everybody. But I know there's a lot of them, so pick up the audiobooks. They're super quick because they're middle grade. I think they're like 3-4 hours a piece, so really easy to get through. Now we're into the top 5, and this is when separating them into 1 to 5 became really difficult. So just assume for my top 5 they're all pretty equal, but I have managed to actually make a decision and separate them. So number 5 is another series, but this time instead of middle grade or YA, it is adult fantasy. And that is the All Souls trilogy by Deborah Harkness, more commonly known as Discovery of Witches, which is the first book. Now, these books are huge. They are about this thick each, and there's 3 of them, and the third book's even bigger, and there is a lot in it. Now, if you haven't read the books, you may be thinking it still sounds familiar, and that's because there's also a TV series. Series 1 came out, I think, last year. Series 2 has literally just been released this week in the UK, and I'm very excited to sit and watch it. But the book series, basically, it follows Diana, who is a witch who doesn't want to be a witch. She has had problems with her powers in the past. She believes being a witch is what killed her parents, so she's separated herself from the supernatural society. But then one day when she's at Oxford in the Bodleian Library, she finds a book and it causes the supernatural society to come looking for her. This series is fantastic. I absolutely love it. You have Diana and Matthew as kind of the two main characters. Diana's a witch, Matthew's a vampire. There are also demons. You have time travel later on. Like, you meet William Shakespeare in book 2. Like, that's amazing. But even more than that, the audiobooks for these are so good and they stop it being intimidated. Because I was scared by the thickness of these books. I was scared by how big they were, but my friend Adele said, "You will love them, please read them." So I did. And they are fantastic. I 100% recommend them. But I really do say try it by audiobook if you're worried. The audiobook narrator is quite soft, quite gentle, very much matches the character of Diana. And I found that it was really easy for me to learn the different concepts of the world, to learn about the hierarchies, because I wasn't kind of sitting going, did I understand what I just read? I just kept going. And I sometimes think that just listening and keeping going past your point of confusion is the best way to understand a more complex story. So I did say a few of these were series, and number 4 is no exception. So number 4 on my list of top 10 audiobooks is The Rosewood Chronicles by Connie Glynn. Now, these books are kind of young YA. I'd class them more in like officially teen bracket, and they are wonderful. So the first book is Undercover Princess, and you meet Ellie and Lottie, who are very opposite people. Ellie is the Crown Princess of Maradova, but she has never been officially announced. Nobody knows what she looks like, who she is, and that is because she doesn't want to be. She hates everything about princesses and princess life. She just kind of wants to do her own thing and be going her own way. And she joins Rosewood, which is a very elite boarding school, as a way of delaying her coming out to society. On the other hand, you have Lottie, who is her exact opposite. Lottie is pink, princessy, girly. She has a tiara that was handed down to her by her mum, and she joins Rosewood on a scholarship. She is not rich, she's not wealthy, she fought her way into this school. And in the first book, the two girls become roommates, and due to some drama and dynamics, they end up switching places, and everyone believes that Lottie is the princess. Now, this book series is fantastic. It's one of my favourites. It's very, very queer and excellently diverse in its queerness. But the audiobooks are amazing. Like, they are fantastic. And I think part of it is because it's narrated by Connie Glynn, the author. And, you know, it's her characters, it's her world. And you can hear the emotion and passion that these characters are dealing with in her narration. But even more important than Connie Glynn's, like, basis of narration is that when we get further in the series and there are other points of view, there are different narrators for those points of view. And this is one of my favourite things in audiobooks, is when they separate points of view by a different narrator, because I find it's a lot easier to follow along with. Otherwise, sometimes you can just be hearing one voice and then you pause and think, who on earth am I listening to right now? Whose story am I meant to be following? And however much I adore Connie Glynn's narration, and as I say, it's the main reason it's on this list, I think the decision to split that with other narrators later down the series was a fantastic one. Also, book 4 comes out in 2021, and if you haven't picked up this series yet, it's the perfect time. It comes out in the middle of February, and I genuinely think everyone would really enjoy this if they just gave it a go. Now we're in the top 3, and my third favourite audiobook is technically part of a series, but I don't put the series on this, just the first book itself, and that is Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzi Leigh. Now, the reason I don't put the whole series on this is because, well, the third book isn't out yet, and Lady's Guide to Petticoats and Piracy, I actually preferred reading physically. I didn't get on with the audiobook for that one. I didn't particularly enjoy the narration, but the first book is phenomenal. And I will wholly put my love for Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue down to the narrator of the audiobook. His voice is beautiful and it's perfect, and it matches Monty, the main character, so well. So if you don't know, Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue is set in early 19th century, and it follows Monty, who is the heir to an estate, but he has been in some trouble and he got kicked out of Eton. So before he is due to come home, settle and learn how to run the estate, he gets to go on his grand tour, which is kind of a year away, visiting across Europe, exploring culture and learning about other societies. So he embarks on this tour with his younger sister Felicity and his best friend Percy, and then things happen. And that's as much as I'm going to say. But I love this book. It's very diverse. Felicity, as you later learn more in the sequel set around her, is asexual. And Monty is bisexual. Percy, I believe, is bisexual. He may be gay. It never really confirms, as far as I can remember, whether he's slept with women. But he is definitely queer because there's a really cute romance in this book. But yeah, I love this book to an extreme amount. I've written university things on it. I adore it, but I would put my first love for the first time I read it down to the narrator. And I've had multiple friends who've read it since and also loved it based on the narration. Yes, if you were wondering, Aria did come join me at my mum's house. So I do have a little friend here, and she probably doesn't want to stay on me, but I'm going to make her. So now we're into my top 2, and second place actually goes to my most recent audiobook read, and that is another series, but it is The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. Now, I 100% have my listening to and love of this series to thank my friend Adele. Now, this book series, long story short, I started it years ago, never kept up with it. Really was just quite intimidated by it because the books are quite thick and I knew it wasn't complete. And then Adele told me that the narrator has a really soft Irish accent. And I have issues for people with beautiful Irish accents. So I bought the first book and then didn't stop. It's fantastic. And again, I think this is an excellent way of making a quite intimidating series less intimidating. So I'll try and summarise what Bone Season's about, but honestly, I am terrible at making this book make sense. So just click the link in the description and it will explain it a lot better than I can. So Bone Season is set in futuristic London, and in this world, people are split into 2 categories. They are amoretic, which are normal people like you and I, or they're voyant. And voyants have abilities to do with the mind, to do with spirits, to do with, voyance, literally being able to see into things. But they also have a connection with this world called the ether. Now, in this world, voyancy is illegal. If you are caught as a voyant, you can be taken, you can be killed, you can be tortured. It's not good. And the book series follows Paige, who is a voyant and has been working in the criminal underground of London for years. And that's about as much as I can say without spoiling the first book, but they are brilliant and the narrator is fantastic. And I'm not just saying this because I have a thing for Irish people, specifically Irish women. I am saying this because they were wonderful. Like, I didn't feel confused. I just kind of went along with it. I listened to audiobooks before bed, and her voice was so soothing and calming that even when they were going through some tough stuff, I felt relaxed. It was delightful. But yeah, even better, I believe the reason that the narrator was chosen is because Paige, the main character, is Irish. And I think, again, having a bit of representation that connects the narrator with the main character is such a wonderful thing to do. At the moment, the first 3 books in the trilogy and the prequel are all available on audiobook. And I believe the 4th book, The Mask Falling, will be coming out on audiobook. And I hope so because I am desperate to finish this series all in audiobook format. So now we come to my all-time favourite audiobook. And I don't think this one's a surprise to anybody who knows me, anybody who particularly loves audiobooks or has watched other favourite audiobooks videos. I am sure this features on many because it is fantastic. And this is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Now, before I get into my absolute love of this book, if you've been hiding under a rock and you don't know what Daisy Jones and the Six is about, it basically follows a fictional rock band in the 70s, and it follows their rise to fame and their quick collapse and breakup. But more in particular, it follows Daisy Jones. and I cannot express my love for the audiobook. Now, the book itself is written in interview format, so you have the interviewer interviewing Daisy and the different members of the band, as well as some family members and other relevant characters. And the whole book is told that way. There is no like set bit of prose. It is all questions and answers. And this, I think, is why the audiobook is so perfect. You know, it was written as if it was spoken word, so having it spoken to you just blends perfectly. But even better, the narrator, the different characters answering, are all narrated by different people. So there is no confusion. You know instantly who is answering this question. You know whether it's the narrator asking a question or a character asking a question. It's brilliant. And also just listening to their voices made the characters more real for me. And this book is bad enough as it is for making you believe that this band exists. Like, I had to stop myself from going and Googling the album and seeing if I could listen to it. But no, they are fictional, but the way they are narrated just makes them so realistic. And there's a lot of people I know who weren't necessarily fussed about reading this book, and then I basically forced them to read the audiobook and they ended up loving it. So, especially if you're somebody who finds audiobooks quite difficult, doesn't always connect really well with the story, I'd recommend giving Daisy Jones and the Six a go. As I say, it's just the format of the way it's written blends so seamlessly, and it's just really soothing and really calming. And I have now listened to the audiobook 3, maybe 4 times. Yeah, so that's it. Those are my top 10 favourite audiobooks. There are definitely a lot more I could have included on this list. As I say, all I did in 2020 pretty much was listen to audiobooks, and I particularly find them an excellent format for rereading books I've physically read in the past. But I'd love to know what your favourite audiobooks are. Are there any I'm missing that I need to listen to? Because seriously, if I don't listen to an audiobook before bed, I don't sleep anymore. So I need more audiobooks in my life. So thank you so much if you've made it to the end of this. As I say, comment down below, let me know your audiobook recommendations. As usual, like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I will see you soon for some more bookish content. Bye!